She was left crying at a lonely stage stop until a cowboy rode in and said no more waiting. The stage stop lay quiet under the late afternoon sun, the kind of quiet that felt too heavy to bear. Dust drifted lazily across the wooden planks of the platform, curling in tiny spirals as if dancing with the wind. A few old chairs and benches stood scattered around, weathered by years of wind and sun, their paint chipped and gray. The woman sat on one of these benches, her hands clutched in her lap, fingers twisting together in nervous tension. She was tired in every sense. Tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of the ache that had settled deep in her chest. Tears streaked her cheeks, leaving dark trails on her dusty skin, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. She had nowhere else to go, and it seemed no one would come for her. She had arrived at the stage stop hours earlier, holding her small bag tightly against her chest. Each step she had taken across the long, empty prairie had felt heavier than the last. The heat of the sun had baked the earth beneath her boots, and the wind had cut across her face like a cold blade, reminding her of just how alone she was. She had been told that help would come, that someone would meet her here, but the hours had stretched into what felt like an eternity. Every sound she heard, an animal rustling in the grass, the creak of a wooden sign swinging in the wind, made her heart leap, only to crash when she realized it was not who she was waiting for. The horizon stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast expanse of gold and brown that seemed to go on forever. The sun hovered low, casting long shadows and painting the sky in brilliant streaks of red and orange. Despite the beauty of the moment, it did little to lift her spirits. She had wanted to enjoy the journey, to feel the excitement of moving forward. But instead, every mile she had traveled felt like it had only led her deeper into loneliness. The stage stop itself was modest, just a small wooden building with a single door and a few windows. A sign above it faded and barely readable. There were no lights yet, no welcoming faces, just silence that pressed against her ears and made her feel smaller than ever. She tried to think of what she would do next, but her mind kept returning to the same thoughts, the same questions she had asked herself, over and over again. Why had they not come? Had she been forgotten? Or had something happened that prevented them from reaching her? Her chest ached with a pain that was more than physical. It was the weight of disappointment, of dreams that had not come true, of promises that had been broken. She had trusted people to be there for her, and now, sitting alone on the worn wooden bench, she felt that trust crumble like dry earth beneath her fingers. As the minutes turned to hours, shadows lengthened and the air grew cooler. The wind carried with it the smell of grass and dust, a dry, earthy scent that reminded her of home, though home felt impossibly far away. She pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders, trying to ward off the chill, though it did little to soothe the loneliness inside her. Every passing moment felt heavier than the last, and her tears came more freely now, hot and wet against her cheeks. She felt like she had been abandoned on the edge of the world, left to face the vast prairie alone. Her thoughts wandered to the people she had known, the family and friends who had promised to be there. Had they forgotten her? Or had they never really cared? The questions twisted inside her sharp and cruel. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to hide the tears, but the effort felt useless. The emptiness of the stage stop mirrored the emptiness she felt inside, and the silence was louder than any voice she had ever heard. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the land. She glanced toward the horizon, half expecting, half hoping, to see someone approaching. She squinted, but all she could see was the endless stretch of prairie, waves of dry grass moving with the wind. Her heart sank further. The idea of waiting another hour, another minute, felt unbearable. She had no one to talk to, no one to lean on, and the thought of spending the night alone in this desolate place sent a shiver down her spine. As she sat there, her eyes began to roam, noticing details she had not seen before. The rough texture of the wooden planks beneath her hands, the cracks in the benches, the tiny insects crawling across the sun-baked boards. Each small detail reminded her that life went on, even when she felt stuck. Yet the weight of waiting was still heavy on her. She closed her eyes, trying to will herself to feel brave, to imagine that someone might still come, but the tears betrayed her courage. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The sun continued its slow descent, and the sky darkened into hues of purple and deep red. The stage stop was empty, silent except for the occasional whisper of wind. She shivered as the temperature dropped, wrapping her shawl tighter around her. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had not eaten all day, but food felt unimportant compared to the ache in her heart. She felt as though the world had moved on without her, leaving her behind in this lonely, forgotten place. And then, just as she was beginning to give in to hopelessness, she thought she heard something in the distance, a faint sound, rhythmic and steady, like the beat of a drum. She squinted toward the horizon, straining to see through the deepening twilight. At first, she thought it was her imagination, a trick of the wind, but the sound grew louder. Unmistakable now, the sound of hooves against the hard-packed earth. Her heart leaped into her throat, hope and disbelief warring inside her. Could it be? Could someone finally be coming? She stood, brushing the dust from her dress and squaring her shoulders, as if preparing to meet the person who might finally end this long, painful wait. The hooves grew louder, the sound strong and steady, and now she could make out a figure approaching through the heat waves rising from the prairie. A lone rider, moving with purpose, dust swirling around them as they rode. She couldn't see the details yet, but there was a presence about them, a confidence that made her chest tighten with anticipation. The rider came closer, and the woman felt her heart pounding in her ears. Each step she had taken today, each tear she had shed, each hour of waiting, it all led to this moment. She didn't know who the rider was, whether a friend or stranger, but the fact that someone was coming filled her with a cautious hope she hadn't felt in hours. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and wiped her face with the back of her hand, determined to face whoever was riding toward her. The stage stop, once a place of despair and loneliness, suddenly seemed alive with possibility. The sound of hooves, the approaching figure, and the fading sunlight combined to create a moment that felt like it had been waiting just for her. For the first time that day, she dared to imagine that maybe she wouldn't be alone after all. Maybe someone would see her, truly see her, and offer the comfort and care she had been longing for. Her legs felt weak as she clutched her bag tighter and stood on the dusty platform. She couldn't predict what would happen next, couldn't know if the rider would stop or pass her by. But a spark had been lit inside her. The stage stop, the empty benches, the long hours of waiting, they had all led to this moment of fragile hope. She took a tentative step forward, ready to meet whoever was coming, ready to find out if she had finally reached the end of her long, lonely wait. The wind tugged at her hair and clothes, carrying the faint scent of leather and horse sweat from the approaching rider. The world seemed to hold its breath along with her, the prairie stretching endlessly around them. And then, at last, she saw the rider clearly. A strong, calm figure atop a powerful horse, moving steadily toward her. There was an air of assurance about them, a quiet confidence that made her chest ache with relief. She stepped forward, tears still lingering on her cheeks, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. This was the moment she had been waiting for, though she had not known if it would ever come. The lonely stage stop no longer felt quite so empty. There was a presence now, something tangible, something real. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. The rider slowed as he neared the stage stop, his horse's hooves thudding steadily against the worn wooden platform. Dust swirled around the hooves and caught in the sunlight, forming a golden haze that made him look almost unreal. The woman froze for a moment, uncertain if she should move forward or stay still. Her heart raced as she studied the approaching figure. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn hat that shaded his eyes, but even under the brim, there was a warmth in his gaze that made her chest ache with both relief and nervous anticipation. As he dismounted, the horse snorted and pawed at the ground. The cowboy adjusted the reins and took a step closer to her, moving with an ease that suggested he had spent a lifetime in these open fields. There was a calmness in his presence, a quiet strength that made the chaos of her emotions feel more manageable. He didn't rush, didn't speak loudly or command attention. Instead, he simply looked at her with genuine concern, as though he could see the pain she had been carrying silently all day. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and steady, carrying over the wind but soft enough not to startle her. There was no judgment in his tone, only a careful curiosity, as if he were trying to understand her without pressing too hard. She swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. Her throat felt tight, and the words she wanted to speak tangled inside her. Finally, she managed a small shake of her head, the tears on her cheeks catching the last rays of sunlight. "I've been waiting," she said quietly. "I thought someone was supposed to meet me, but—" Her voice broke and she trailed off, unable to finish. Cowboy nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she had said. He didn't interrupt or fill the silence with empty words. Instead, he moved closer, keeping a respectful distance, and gently offered her a folded handkerchief. "Here," he said simply. "It's not much, but it might help." She took it hesitantly, brushing it against her tear-stained cheeks. The gesture was small, but it carried more comfort than she had expected. For the first time that day, she felt a little less alone. She glanced up at him, noticing the kind lines around his eyes, the way his hands moved with careful purpose, and she wondered why someone like him would stop for her.
I didn't know anyone would come," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
She looked down at her hands again, twisting the edges of the handkerchief between her fingers. "I've been here for hours, and I thought maybe no one cared." The cowboy shook his head, a small, reassuring smile tugging at his lips. "Sometimes people get delayed, or plans go wrong. Doesn't mean no one cares, but it does mean you shouldn't have to wait alone anymore." There was a gentle firmness in his voice, a promise that he was there now, and he intended to make sure she was safe. She blinked, caught off guard by his words. His presence was calming in a way she hadn't expected. She wanted to trust him, but was still hesitant, her heart wary from disappointment. Yet something about him, the way he spoke, the steadiness of his eyes, the ease of his movements, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could let herself hope again. Who are you?" she asked, curiosity and caution mingling in her voice. He tilted his hat back slightly, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, but kind in every line. "Just someone passing through. Call me Tom," he said simply. "And you?" "Emily," she replied. The name felt strange in her own ears, like a small anchor in the storm of her emotions. She had spent so long feeling invisible that even saying her name aloud to someone who cared felt like a relief. Tom nodded, as though acknowledging her presence in a way that reassured her she mattered. "Well, Emily," he said, "I'm glad I found you here. You shouldn't have to be waiting alone like this." His words were quiet but firm, carrying weight beyond their simplicity. For a few moments, they simply stood there, the wind rustling through the tall grass surrounding the stage stop, carrying the scents of dust and earth and distant wildflowers. Emily noticed how he seemed to take in the world around him, the way he observed details she hadn't even considered. The patterns in the clouds, the slight unevenness of the wooden platform, the way her shawl had blown slightly in the wind. It was as if he saw her not just as a person in need, but as someone who had a story, a life, and feelings worth acknowledging. "Would you like to sit for a bit?" Tom asked finally, gesturing toward the bench she had been occupying. "You've had a long wait." Emily hesitated, then nodded, grateful for the invitation. She lowered herself onto the bench again, clutching her bag tightly as if it were a shield. Tom sat down beside her, careful to leave just enough space so she didn't feel crowded. The sun continued its slow descent, casting long shadows across the wooden planks, but somehow the presence of another person made the chill more bearable. They spoke for a while, at first in small, careful sentences. Emily told him a little about why she had been waiting, though she left out the parts that hurt the most, afraid that the pain would be too much for a stranger. Tom listened, never interrupting, never rushing her. When she paused, he simply nodded, giving her the space to gather her thoughts and feelings. "You've had a rough day," he said quietly, after a long moment. "But it's over now. You're not alone anymore. His voice carried an ease and assurance that made her chest feel lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. Emily looked at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time without fear. There was something in them that felt steady, reliable, and real. She found herself smiling, a small, hesitant smile, and was surprised at how good it felt. She had spent so long feeling abandoned, ignored, and invisible, that even a tiny moment of warmth felt monumental. "Thank you," she said softly. I don't know what I would have done if no one came." "You don't have to worry about that now," he replied gently. "I'm here, and I'll make sure you're safe. No more waiting." The words hit her like a balm to a long open wound. No more waiting. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone was offering certainty in a world that had felt uncertain and unkind. Emily felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her chest, small but insistent. She hadn't realized how tired she was of waiting, of hoping for things that might never come. And now, with this quiet, steady presence beside her, the world didn't seem quite so lonely. The conversation continued, flowing more naturally now. Tom asked her about the journey that had brought her to the stage stop, and she found herself sharing details she hadn't intended to. His questions were gentle, not prying, and they gave her a sense that he genuinely wanted to know her story, to understand the path that had led her here. She talked about the long stretches of road, the sun beating down, the wind whipping through her hair, and the growing sense of isolation she had felt with each passing hour. As she spoke, Tom listened, nodding occasionally, his eyes never leaving hers. There was a patience in him that made her feel safe, a quiet understanding that didn't demand anything from her but offered everything in return: attention, respect, and kindness. She realized that she had been holding her breath, unconsciously waiting for someone to judge or abandon her, and for the first time, she felt she could exhale.
"I've spent so long waiting for things to happen," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly.
"Waiting for someone to care, waiting for things to get better. And now I don't have to wait anymore, do I?" Tom smiled gently. "No," he said, "not anymore. Things start moving from here. You don't have to wait for someone else. Sometimes you just need someone to help you take the first step." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with deeper shades of red and orange. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of comfort and safety she hadn't experienced in a long time. The stage stop, once a place of despair, now seemed less lonely. She realized that even in the vast open prairie, someone could show up when you needed them most. Someone who could remind you that hope and kindness still existed in the world. Tom stayed with her until the light faded and the first stars appeared in the deepening sky. He didn't rush her, didn't push her to leave, but simply offered his presence, steady and reassuring. She felt a connection forming, not instant or overwhelming, but quiet, natural, and comforting. For the first time since she had arrived at the lonely stage stop, she felt a sense of possibility, a fragile hope that perhaps her story was about to change. Finally, he stood and adjusted his hat, offering her a hand. "Come on," he said, a gentle firmness in his voice. "No more waiting. Let's get you out of here." Emily looked at him, the offer clear and simple, yet it carried a weight she hadn't expected. Taking his hand felt like stepping into something new, something safe. She nodded, and for the first time that day she allowed herself to hope that everything might just be all right.
Emily stepped onto the dusty path beside the cowboy, her fingers still wrapped loosely around his hand.
The sun had fully set now, leaving a warm glow behind the horizon and a soft chill in the air. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, its golden waves of grass rippling in the evening wind. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt the comfort of not being alone. She walked carefully beside him, her boots crunching against the hard-packed earth, each step a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The cowboy, Tom, led the way with ease. He knew the land as though it were an extension of himself, navigating the path with confident, steady movements. His horse followed close behind, its dark coat gleaming faintly in the last light of dusk. Emily noticed the way he observed the prairie, scanning the horizon, noting the dips in the land, the small trees, and even the smallest patches of grass that looked out of place. It was a quiet confidence, the kind that only comes from years of experience. She felt safe with him, more than she had felt in a long time. "Where are we going?" Emily asked softly, breaking the silence that had settled around them. Her voice sounded small against the vastness of the prairie. "Somewhere safe," Tom replied, without hesitation. "A place where you don't have to wait or wonder if anyone will come. You'll be comfortable, and you'll have people around who care. You've earned a little peace." Emily nodded, though she didn't speak. The words themselves carried hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in days. She had been so consumed by waiting and disappointment that the idea of safety seemed almost unreal. Yet, walking beside Tom, she felt it could be possible. She stole glances at him as they walked, noticing the calm determination in his posture, the way he moved with purpose, yet remained relaxed. There was a quiet strength about him that made her feel grounded, as though she could finally lean on someone without fear. The journey was slow, and the prairie seemed endless, but Emily found herself talking more than she expected. She told Tom about her life, about the people she had trusted who hadn't kept their promises, about the small joys she had missed along the way. She spoke of sunsets she had admired alone, of laughter she had longed to share, and even of fears she had kept hidden deep inside. Tom listened with patience, never interrupting, never offering empty words. When he did speak, it was with kindness and understanding, making her feel like her words mattered. "You've been through a lot," he said quietly after a pause in the conversation. "But that doesn't define you. It's just a part of your story, and it's not over yet. You still have chapters to write, and I'd be honored to help make sure they're brighter than the ones you've left behind." Emily's throat tightened at his words, and she looked down at her hands. She wanted to believe him, to allow herself to hope again, but fear lingered at the edges of her heart.
I don't know if I can," she admitted softly. "I've been let down so many times before."
"What if it happens again?" Tom's expression softened, and he gently took her hand in both of his. "Then I'll be here," he said firmly. "Not just today, not just tonight, but as long as you need. You won't have to wait alone again." The night settled around them as they walked. Stars began to appear in the sky, tiny points of light that seemed to promise that even in the darkness, there was hope. The prairie was alive with quiet sounds, the rustle of grass, the distant call of a night bird, the soft snort of Tom's horse. Emily felt the tension in her body slowly ease as she matched her steps to his, letting the rhythm of walking and talking guide her toward a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in weeks. As they continued, a sudden noise startled Emily. A branch snapped nearby, and her heart leapt into her throat. She glanced around, fear making her pulse quicken. Tom immediately moved closer to her side, his hand brushing hers in reassurance. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Just the wind or a small animal. Nothing to worry about." Emily took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. She realized how tense she had been, how every sound made her jump because she had been alone for so long. Now, with Tom beside her, she could feel the weight lifting from her shoulders. She wasn't just walking through the prairie. She was walking toward a new beginning, guided by someone she trusted. The path they followed was uneven, with small hills and patches of rough grass, but Tom's steady presence made every step easier. He helped her navigate the trickier spots, occasionally offering his arm for balance. Each gesture, small and thoughtful, strengthened the bond forming between them. Emily noticed it wasn't just the physical help that mattered. It was the reassurance, the patience, and the kindness he offered freely. "Have you always lived around here?" she asked after a while, curiosity breaking through her nervousness. Tom smiled faintly. "Most of my life. This land teaches you things. How to move carefully, how to notice details, how to respect the world around you. It's a harsh place sometimes, but it also shows you beauty you won't find anywhere else." Emily listened, picturing him moving through these wide-open fields, feeling at home among the grass, wind, and sky. She realized she admired not just his strength, but the way he connected with the world around him. There was patience in him, a quiet wisdom that came from paying attention and being present. She felt honored that he was sharing this journey with her, guiding her not just across the prairie, but toward a sense of safety and hope she hadn't felt in a long time.
As they walked, the conversation drifted to lighter topics.
They shared small jokes and laughed softly at funny memories from their pasts. Emily discovered that humor could exist even after disappointment, and that laughter could feel like a warm sun on the coldest days. Tom laughed too, but it was quiet and genuine, never forced, and it made Emily feel at ease. With each word and gesture, the bond between them grew stronger, a connection built not on grand declarations, but on quiet understanding and shared moments. Hours passed, and the first signs of a small settlement appeared in the distance. A few lights flickering in windows, the faint sound of voices and animals. Emily's heart lifted as she realized they were close to safety. The thought of reaching a place where she could rest, eat, and be among people who cared filled her with relief. She glanced at Tom, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for stopping, for listening, for not letting me be alone." Tom nodded, brushing off the compliment with a modest smile. "You're welcome. I told you, you don't have to wait anymore. Things start moving from here." Just as they approached the edge of the settlement, a small challenge arose. One of the horses grazing near a fence panicked and bolted, kicking up dust and heading toward the path. Emily froze, her heart pounding, unsure what to do. But Tom acted instantly. He guided her behind him, speaking in calm, clear tones to reassure both her and the horse. With a few firm words and steady movements, he redirected the frightened animal, preventing it from running into them or causing harm. Emily watched in awe as he handled the situation with skill and calmness. You're amazing," she whispered, still catching her breath. Tom shrugged, smiling faintly. "Experience. You learn to stay calm when things get tricky."
Helps to keep the people around you safe, too.
The incident passed quickly, leaving only a lingering sense of amazement and relief.
Emily felt a rush of gratitude and trust. She realized that she wasn't just following someone who was strong. She was following someone who genuinely cared, someone who could face challenges and protect her without question. Finally, they reached the small settlement, its warm lights and sounds welcoming them like a soft embrace. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. Dogs barked, and the smell of cooking fires drifted through the air. Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her as she stepped into the familiar comfort of human presence. The journey across the prairie, the hours of waiting and walking, the fear and hope, they all culminated in this moment of arrival. Tom led her to a small inn where she could rest, eat, and begin to feel safe again. She looked at him, eyes shining with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "No thanks needed," he replied, his voice warm. "Seeing you safe and smiling is enough. Just remember, no more waiting. You deserve better, and I'll help you see that." Emily smiled genuinely for the first time in days, a smile that came from relief, hope, and the beginning of trust. She realized that her life, which had felt heavy with disappointment and loneliness, was starting to change. The journey across the prairie had been more than just physical. It had been emotional, a journey from fear and isolation to hope and connection. And it was only the beginning. As she settled inside the inn, Emily reflected on the events of the day. She thought of the stage stop, the long hours of waiting, the despair that had almost consumed her, and the sudden appearance of Tom, the cowboy who had changed everything. She realized that life could be unpredictable, that moments of despair could be transformed by kindness, and that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt with patience and care. That night, as Emily lay in the small, warm room provided for her, she thought of Tom, his steady presence, and his promise of no more waiting. She smiled softly to herself, a sense of hope and possibility blooming in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of brighter days ahead, knowing that someone who cared was by her side, guiding her toward a safer, happier future. Emily stepped into the small settlement with Tom beside her, the warmth of the town wrapping around her like a comforting blanket after the long, cold journey across the prairie. The soft glow of lanterns lit the streets, casting gentle shadows that danced across wooden buildings. She could hear the faint murmur of voices, the laughter of children, and the occasional bark of a dog echoing through the air. It was a world away from the empty, lonely stage stop she had left behind, a place full of life, warmth, and the promise of safety. Tom led her down the main street, his hand brushing lightly against hers, a silent reassurance that she was no longer alone. Emily's heart felt lighter with each step. The events of the past day, the waiting, the despair, the uncertainty, seemed to recede behind her, replaced by a growing sense of hope. She couldn't help but glance around, taking in the details. The wooden signs swinging gently in the evening breeze, the smell of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery, the soft glow of lanterns in the windows. For the first time in days, she felt the possibility of belonging somewhere. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, her voice carrying both curiosity and a hint of nervousness. "To a place where you can rest and be safe," Tom replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "Somewhere you can eat, sleep, and start feeling like yourself again." Emily nodded, trusting him. She had already learned that he was steady, reliable, and kind. He had appeared when she needed him most, and his presence had brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized she could follow him, not just physically across the prairie, but emotionally into a place where she could feel safe and cared for. They arrived at a small inn, the kind that welcomed travelers with warm firelight and the smell of home-cooked meals. The innkeeper greeted them with a friendly nod, seemingly expecting Tom, and offered Emily a room with a small bed, a soft quilt, and a window that looked out onto the town square. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her as she stepped inside. The room was cozy, simple, and safe, the exact opposite of the cold, lonely stage stop she had waited at just hours before. "Rest here for a while," Tom said, his voice gentle. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of outside. You deserve a moment to breathe." Emily smiled softly, grateful. "Thank you," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "For everything. For not letting me be alone." Tom shrugged modestly, but there was a warmth in his eyes. "You don't have to thank me. Just remember, no more waiting. Life is too short to spend it waiting for someone to care. Sometimes you have to accept help when it comes, and sometimes it comes in unexpected ways."
Emily thought about those words as she sank onto the bed.
She had spent so long waiting for help, for kindness, for someone to see her pain, and now it had arrived in the form of Tom. She realized that trust and hope could be rebuilt, even after disappointment. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the comfort of the room, the soft quilt, and the gentle knowledge that she was no longer alone. Later, Tom returned with a small tray of food, freshly baked bread, fruit, and a cup of warm tea. Emily watched as he set it down on the small table by the window. The simple act of care brought tears to her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. She had been so used to facing life alone that even the smallest gesture of kindness felt monumental.
"Eat something," Tom encouraged gently.
"You need your strength. You've had a long day." Emily nodded and took a small bite, savoring the warmth of the bread and the sweetness of the fruit. The tea soothed her throat and calmed her mind. She realized that this was more than just food. It was a symbol of care, of safety, and of the possibility of normalcy returning to her life. As they ate, they talked quietly. Tom asked about her dreams, her hopes, and what she had always wanted for herself. Emily found herself opening up, sharing things she hadn't told anyone in years. She spoke of wanting to feel safe, to have a place to belong, and to experience moments of joy without fear or hesitation. Tom listened with patience, offering gentle encouragement and understanding. He didn't rush her, didn't judge her, and didn't try to fix everything at once. He simply offered his presence, a steady reassurance that she was not alone. "You've been strong," he said softly, after a long pause. "Stronger than you realize. You've faced a lot, and yet you're still standing. That's something to be proud of." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had often doubted her strength, focusing only on the moments of fear and uncertainty, but hearing it from someone who had seen her struggle, who had helped her through it, made her realize that she had endured far more than she had given herself credit for. Night fell fully, and the inn became quiet. Emily prepared for bed, feeling the soft quilt and the warmth of the room settle around her. She thought about the stage stop, the long hours of waiting, and the sudden arrival of Tom. It all seemed like a distant memory now, softened by the kindness she had received and the hope she felt for the future. She realized that life could change in an instant, that despair could turn into hope, and that trust, once broken, could be restored with patience and care. Tom stayed nearby, keeping watch until she fell asleep, his presence a quiet promise that she was safe. Emily drifted into a peaceful sleep, the events of the day weaving into her dreams, blending fear, hope, and relief into a tapestry of new beginnings. The next morning, Emily woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the window. The town was waking, and the sounds of life, birds singing, distant voices, and the clatter of hooves filled the air. She stretched and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in a long time. Tom was already awake, checking the horses outside and making sure everything was in order. "Good morning," he said, smiling as he noticed her sitting by the window. "Sleep well?" Emily nodded, smiling back. "Yes, for the first time in a long time, I really did." "Good," he replied. "That's exactly what you need. Rest, comfort, and a place where you can start fresh." They shared a quiet breakfast together, the simplicity of the meal a stark contrast to the uncertainty of the previous day. Emily realized that these small moments, eating, talking, laughing quietly, were building a foundation of trust and hope. She felt stronger, more capable, and more ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she was not alone. After breakfast, Tom suggested a walk through the town. Emily followed him, her steps confident and steady. The streets were lively, full of people going about their day, and Emily felt a sense of connection she hadn't felt in years. She noticed children playing, neighbors chatting, and shopkeepers tending to their stores. For the first time, she felt a part of something larger than herself, a community where kindness and care were possible. As they walked, Tom spoke quietly about the importance of noticing the small joys in life, the laughter of children, the warmth of the sun, the simple pleasure of a shared meal. Emily listened, absorbing every word, and realized that life didn't always have to be about waiting, fear, or disappointment. It could also be about connection, hope, and moments of unexpected kindness. By the time they returned to the inn, Emily felt a sense of completeness she hadn't known she could feel. The journey from the lonely stage stop to this vibrant, welcoming town had been more than physical. It had been emotional, a journey from despair to hope, from fear to trust. She realized that Tom had not only helped her find safety, but had also helped her rediscover her own strength, resilience, and capacity for hope. As the sun began to set once more, painting the sky in warm hues of red and gold, Emily and Tom stood outside the inn, looking out over the prairie that had once felt so empty and endless. She felt a sense of gratitude, relief, and anticipation for the future. The stage stop, the long hours of waiting, the tears and fear, they were all behind her now. Ahead lay new possibilities, new connections, and a sense of peace she had longed for. Tom turned to her, his eyes warm and steady. "Remember what I said?" he said softly. "No more waiting. You deserve better, and you've earned every bit of the peace and joy coming your way." Emily smiled, her heart full. "I won't forget," she said. "And thank you for everything." He nodded, and together they watched the sun sink below the horizon, the golden light casting long shadows across the land. Emily realized that life could be unpredictable, that kindness could appear when least expected, and that hope could be found even in the darkest moments. She felt a quiet certainty that, with Tom beside her, she would never have to wait alone again. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emily allowed herself to dream freely. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, cared for, and ready to embrace the future. The lonely stage stop, the waiting, and the tears were now part of the past. Ahead lay a new chapter, full of possibility, companionship, and hope.